Welcome, everybody, to another rendition of the Lone Wolf Show. I'm the Lone Wolf, and I have with me a very special guest, and we know and love him well in the pagan community, the Reverend Don Lewis. How are you doing, Rev?
I'm very good, thank you.
So it's a pleasure to have you on the Lone Wolf Show. I've been really wanting to have you on. I got so many different questions to ask you, but right off rip, I want to ask you, how did you come to your current spirituality?
Well, I'm a member of a familial tradition, and my mother belonged to that tradition. She was the head of that tradition for a number of years, so I was raised with it and brought into it at a very early age. So, for me, unlike for a lot of people, it was not in any way an act of rebellion. It was kind of the opposite. It was meeting my parents' expectations.
And you're also a celebrated author. What are some of the books that you've written?
I have written the Correllian degree lesson books, the various witch school books, Ritual and Theory and Practice, Reverend Don's Book of Astrology, Reverend Don's Book of Numerology, about to come out with Reverend Don's Book of Stones, Crystals, and Metals, the Correllian Book of the Dead, a number of different books, also Great Women of Antiquity, and Reverend Don's super omnibus of incantations and invocations for all occasions, and that might be the list, I'm not sure.
Are most of these books available on Correllian Press?
Yes, you can find pretty much everything I just mentioned at CorrellianPublishing.com. I also have been involved in a number of magazines, but those are not necessarily still available.
Mm-hmm. Very interesting. The titles of the published works that you spoke of are percentage-wise all published with Correllian Press. Are any of those books not published with Correllian Press?
The version of the Witch School Lessons that carries that title was published by Llewellyn Publications.
Mm-hmm. So you're published with Llewellyn at one point?
Yes, for a number of years.
What year were you first published with Llewellyn?
It was either 2006 or 2007. It's been a few years ago. Now, and that was for those books. I also had at one time been the editor of their astrological planner that they put out yearly, and that was in the early 1990s.
Mm-hmm.
Although
and those are,
I can't tell you exactly where in the 1990s anymore because that was a long time ago.
Mm-hmm. And those books are still popular today, so that's really cool.
Yes.
Really, really cool. So as I understand, you've done a lot of videography of various pagan locations and places and people throughout your, I want to say, journey through contemporary paganism in the United States. Can you remember or recall we could definitely back up what's public online, but can you remember the first time that you hit record on whatever device you were using, and what kind of device were you using for your very first pagan oriented interview?
My first pagan oriented interviews would have been at the very video interviews would have been at the very end of the 1980s, the very early 1990s, using an old-fashioned video camera bigger than my head, and none of those are online because of the changes in technology. I think the very first person I may have interviewed that way was probably my cousin Crystal, who was, is first priestess, now retired, of the Correllian tradition. There were a number of people I interviewed during that time period, but most of those interviews were for specific events because we didn't have an online place to put them there. I believe I've still got most of those tapes. And, there were people like Donna Cole Schultz in Chicago, Rael Basson, and a number of other people from that community. In the 90s, I was very heavily focused on the Chicago community. And of course, I'd done written interviews before that, but video interviews, that would be the start of it. And it was around 2005 that we started doing them for online purposes. And the very first person that I interviewed, well, the very first celebrity author that I interviewed for an online program was Raven Grimassi.
Mm-hmm.
And we interviewed Raven at the St. Louis Pagan Picnic, I believe in 2005.
Mm-hmm. Which is a great piece of history.
Yes.
Great piece of history. And I do interject, that particular historical footage does stream right here on Witchcraft TV, and we are so grateful that we have access to that historical footage. So thank you for that, Don.
Oh, absolutely.
Thank you for that.
We did this all with the idea of helping people feel more connected to their community. And anything that helps with that is good. Years ago, we noticed that many people were either geographically or socially isolated from the wider community. And a lot of the things we've done over the years had to do with that realization, especially the video. I mean, part of it was wanting to create content, of course, but also wanting people to feel what it was like to go to these events, to meet these people and be able to hear them speak and see what they were like. Because if you can remember back to 2005, there were very few of our pagan authors who had ever been interviewed on video that people would get to see. Some of the very well-known ones had been, but that was about the extent of it. And they were rare interviews and not easy to find. And we felt that it would be very helpful for people to be able to see what a pagan festival is like if they've never been to one, to hear their favorite author speaking if they'd never heard them speak before, and or for that matter to see public rituals they could not have attended, to see different places they would not be able to travel to. And that's part of why we set out to do Magic TV, now Corellian TV. And it became, well, I mean, from the start it really was a passion.
Mm-hmm.
And we interviewed, I don't know how many people, but a very large number of people, including well-known authors, leaders of organizations and traditions, and institutions within the community, and just ordinary people who were attending different events to see how they were enjoying them, what their experiences were. A lot of times we would interview the merchants who were at the events and give them a chance to promote what they were doing, but also to give people a feeling for what's here in our community, which at that time, if you couldn't physically be there, you really couldn't get.
Mm-hmm. Wow, right to the big screen, right to the big. So you mentioned material that you were with at one of Raven Grimassi's lectures.
Yes.
What are some other notable interviews that were kind of that you were very happy about, that kind of gave you a lot of joy in the moment, that was I don't know, path changing? How much did the art of the interview or networking affect your personal spirituality?
That's a very interesting question. Well, I am always curious and interested in how other people do things and how they approach their practice, their community, whatever it may be. And so it was very, occasionally very broadening particularly when it was people outside of what you might call the normal circuit. One of the ones I remember who I guess would answer this question, because it's a very memorable interview for me, was the Pyramid Guy. And the Pyramid Guy, it's not pagan that I know of, but New Age. And he was at a particular show that we had gone to and interviewed people. And he was all about the idea of pyramid technology, and he was just a very unexpected, interesting person to talk to. And that would be the kind of thing that I found most expanding in doing this kind of work. Speaking with people who weren't necessarily expected, or finding out things that I perhaps had not realized. Some of the interviews that I most enjoyed, Olivia Robertson is right at the top of that list. For people who are not familiar with Olivia Robertson, she was one of the co-founders of the Fellowship of Isis. A most remarkable woman. I had the great honor to know her and to interview her a number of times. And for many years, she would leave her home in Ireland once a year to travel around the world to different Icean locations, and always stopped in Chicago for the Chicago Icean Mystery Festival, or Goddess Festival. And for a long time, I would interview her there, either on video or for radio, because we've also done a lot of radio interviews, myself and Ed the Pagan. And I always found Olivia to be a very refreshing individual, and a person who always left you feeling better after talking to her than whatever you felt like when you went in. And if you felt great when you went in, you still felt better when you came out, because she was just that kind of person. We've also interviewed Oberon Zell a number of times, and probably our most popular interview was with Oberon. We interviewed Raven Gramazi a number of times. We interviewed Raymond Buckland a couple of times. We still have some footage of Buckland and his museum that's never made it online yet. But we had cameras there when they first got the Buckland Museum back and unpacked it, and all the stories he told about all of these different items, which is fascinating. Someday, hopefully, we'll get it up. And, we've had interviews with people, some of whom I did not expect to interview or to get to interview. Ted Andrews, I interviewed a very short time before his death. I interviewed Margot Adler, which was a fascinating experience. It's a very, very, very wide number of people. And, some of them told stories that were not necessarily things that I was familiar with. I once interviewed Donald Frew, who talked about his research into Gardnerian writings and the idea of their Scottish origin, which I thought he presented very beautifully. In one of our interviews with Buckland, he talks about how Gerald Gardner did not like the word Wicca and did not want his people to use it. Wicca with 2 C's, because it referred to a wider community. I've always been very happy we actually got that story on film. There have been so many people that I've had the pleasure of interviewing, and many of whom are no longer living, and in this world, and that is, it makes it into not only an entertainment of the moment, but a historical archive. Mm-hmm. And one of the things that we feel that we have done is provide a lens into the pagan community at certain periods in time. If you want to get a feel for at least certain parts of the pagan community in the early 2000s, we have videos showing the people in the community and how they were interacting. And I think that is something that I wish that we had had in earlier generations, but for the most part, we do not. Um, a small number of people were interviewed earlier, uh, but usually not from within the community. And um, and it really is a very small number prior to the technology becoming so easy to use. Now, for example, what we're doing here, this kind of interview, if you were to go back to, say, 1990, the technology to do this cost, I want to say, about $20,000 and involved a lot of machinery, certainly not just setting it up on your computer. And the fact that we can do this really changes everything. I've had an interest in film really my whole life. And back in the 1980s, one of the things I was working on was an amateur movie developed out of the works of Donna Lyon-Rose. And because I was working on that, I knew what these things cost and how hard it could be at that time to put together a video. In those days, to put together a film, you were still hand cutting and hand taping them with little clear tape. And my goodness, what a way we've come in just those few decades.
Mhm. Yeah, a lot of evolution in technology, a lot of evolution in paganism. Well, you mentioned a lot of different iconic, people in the community. Even historically, that Summer in Summerland, and
Yeah.
they're not here. They're not here anymore. Has there ever been a point in your walk about where you kind of contemplated everything that some of these brilliant minds in our community have said, and kind of pulled it into like any rational thinking or cognitive analyzation that you can think of?
What exactly do you mean?
What was the universal message from the various iconic historic
Okay.
interviews that you've had? What was the universal message of them all?
I think the most universal message was one of hope for the future and wanting to continue to see our community grow and expand. And I think most everyone that I've interviewed felt these were good things. For a lot of the interviews I did, particularly the first time I was interviewing someone, one of the things I would ask is what changes they had seen in the community during their career. And I would also ask what they hope to see change still farther in the future. And, generally speaking, the answers have to do with people coming together, increased communication, and working to build a better community and a better world. And I think that is probably, if there's a universal message, that would probably be it. Now, those people didn't necessarily all agree on how to do that, but they all agreed that that was what they wanted. And, that's always going to be true. Everyone has their idea of what is best to do. But I think we all, in the end, do want the same things, for the most part.
So in paganism in general, the message, in the old school or back in the days, what you're saying is that the grass grows wild, and as long as we're growing, who cares? Who cares what happens? As long as we're growing. So growth was, that sounds just about right. I mean, growth is what nature is all about, right? Growth.
Well, I was taught that if you want to understand deity, you look at nature.
Mm-hmm.
And what nature teaches us is that life is always growing and always changing. And, there are people certainly who do not like change.
Mm-hmm.
But that's a guaranteed part of our future, no matter what. There will always be change. There will always be new things. And you know, I don't know that most of the people I interviewed would quite have said that they favored the idea of growth no matter what, but they were happy to see the growth and the coming together. And they wanted a strong community. They wanted a better community that everyone can come to who wants to be there. And I think that's good.
Mm-hmm. For sure, for sure. You mentioned Olivia Robertson.
Yes.
Who I do like the videos that you had made because of the time frame.
Mm.
Some of it's, you know, the quality is a lot bit different. So
that's true.
You know, so as somebody that wants to, you know, program really good TV in modern times, but I think it was an exception. That's Olivia Robertson, and it's historical footage, so it doesn't matter how blurry it is. You know, I don't care.
Well, you have to remember that at that time, the technology would not have allowed what we now call high definition video, and it did not exist, at least in ordinary people's hands. So yeah, those early videos do not have the resolution of modern videos. Now, in some cases, if I were to reprocess the original recording, I could increase the resolution because the original recording was better than what could be uploaded at that time. But it still wouldn't be like modern high-definition video. It simply hadn't been developed yet. And, you know, also, one of the interviews with Olivia, and for a period of time, I was working with a broken camera. And you can tell this if you look at the colors. Something had burned out in it. And, you know, our attitude, what we like to say, is progress over perfection. The idea of not doing the video because it wasn't going to be perfect really did not enter into the question. But, you know, some of them, from that particular period of a couple of months, the colors will be somewhat off. Mm-hmm. But still, there's no similar video. And, you know, with Olivia, she was at that point in her 90s, or at least in her upper 80s. And so, you know, passing on a chance to interview her did not guarantee there'd be another one. Because at that age, you never know. And so every chance I had, I took. And in fact, she did eventually cross into spirit at the age of 97, which is a good long run. And because of that longevity, we got a number of interviews. We have on Corellian TV workshops that she did. I have video we never uploaded from ICN Mystery Plays, where she's doing the Oracle. And of course, the Mystery Plays were all inspired writing that she brought through. And so the whole play itself reflects Olivia and her work. Mm-hmm. One of the things I think that we've done in addition to the interviews is very interesting is we have videoed a number of rituals, which only occurred once. And even if they should be attempted again, they certainly would be different. But one of them was the Chicago Pagan Unity Night, featuring Oberon Zell as the guest, but one after another, all of the pagan groups in Chicago took their turn in that ritual. Many of those people no longer living. Dina Buddha, the ranking ICN archpriestess in Chicago, who we also interviewed on a number of occasions, but she is no longer living also in this world. But there she is in that ritual. The Obama blessing ritual that took place in Washington, D.C. on the day of President Obama's inauguration, or maybe it was the day before, but it was in conjunction with it. And we were there to record that, which nothing like that, to my knowledge, ever happened before or since. But you can see it on Magic TV, now Corellian TV. And I think that preserving those little bits of history is a very important thing.
It's definitely an important thing. It's definitely historical. When you had your path and your walkabout, and you just all of a sudden, poof, you're in front of Olivia Robertson, and you just was like, "I'm going to hit record now," and it was just, and it just was kind of happening. I mean, I've been amongst a few good interviews in person. And do you ever get like uncomfortable or anxiety or nervous? Like, how do you approach a prominent figure in the pagan community and just like say, hey, I really like to interview. Can we just hit this record button? Because sometimes myself, I feel like, well, shoot, am I a bug, a pest? Is it annoying? Is it like paparazzi media? How does it? Because I mean, do you ever feel like that, Don?
I can't say that there have been no occasions, but you have to remember I knew most of these people before I interviewed them. Many of them I had known for many years, right. Because I had been in a leadership position where I had been working with them in different contexts. So it's not like they didn't know who I was. But there were a lot of people that I interviewed who did not know who I was. Not the Olivia Robertsons or the Oberon Zells, but other people who weren't necessarily plugged in at that level that I would have had occasion to know them. And yeah, I mean, I've had different reactions. Some people really loved to be interviewed. Some really didn't want to be interviewed. And so sometimes there could be a little anxiety as to whether they were going to want to do it or not. But I would say for me, where I had anxiety really was the first interviews that I did on camera, because it was a new thing for me. I'd interviewed people in writing for many, many years. Some of these people I'd spoken with, tell you how old I am, on the phone for hours. For many occasions, but doing it on camera was a new thing. And you can see that in some of the early videos. But after doing a few, you get used to it, as you know, and that level of anxiety goes away. After that, for the most part, I would say it was not an anxiety-provoking thing, because once I got the hang of it, I knew what I was doing. Now, I will point out that not everybody I've interviewed were always people I was on particularly good terms with, because I didn't feel that was relevant. If they were someone who was worth interviewing, they didn't have to be my friend. And everybody I've ever interviewed, even on the occasion that perhaps they did not particularly like me, everyone was always very well behaved. And in some cases, I think it improved situations to have done that, and to not let personal feelings step in the way of it sometimes. I think that in our community, people far too often let their personal feelings overwhelm the work they're doing. And I don't think that's good. Now, sometimes it may be necessary. I'm not saying it's never necessary, but there are people. Well, if you go to Corellian TV now, you'll find interviews with people who I was not necessarily on good terms with later. We never took them down because it's part of history. And we always felt that maintaining that history was worth doing. Mm-hmm. And it was not a matter of, well, let me go talk just to my friends. It was, let's go talk to everybody. And I think that was very important.
It makes me feel like, as far as the internet goes,
Mm.
whatever you do and say on the internet, whether it's typing, publishing, video, uploading, it is there like stone. You have etched it in stone, and it is going to stay there forever. So just be kind, man.
Yes.
So let's just be kind. That's one of the. That's where I'm at. So, Don, tell me, are you a member of the Fellowship of Isis?
Yes, I am. I have been since 1986.
Since
I'm an archpriest of Isis, in fact, and a member of the Triad Union.
That is very, very fascinating. Can you tell me anything public about your trajectory to that particular path? How did you end up involved with the Fellowship of Isis? I think they're a very pretty, gorgeous, beautiful entity that isn't talked about a lot. And it's not talked about a lot, but I think they're a beautiful type of energy. Tell me about it.
Well, I joined the Fellowship of Isis along with several other members of the Correllian tradition in 1986 because we felt their teachings were the closest to our own that we had found out in the wider world. And then for years, I would read the magazine, but I didn't do anything. There was no one else near me who was doing anything. And then I moved to Chicago after my mother's death. And my long-term associate, Ed the Pagan, was involved in the Parliament of the World's Religions, where the Iceans, in that first modern parliament, had a very prominent role. Lady Olivia was one of the governing council. I don't think that's exactly the right word for it, but the Council for a Parliament of the World's Religions. And we did not know at that time that she was actually staying just a few doors up the street from us, or we would have interviewed her then, but or up the street from him. But after the Parliament, I became involved in the Chicago Fellowship of Isis because there were very active groups there. I mentioned Dina Buddha, who was the most prominent member in the area, and she was charged by Lady Olivia with doing a yearly convention. And for a long time, as long as I remained in Chicago, I was very prominent in those conventions. And that really led me deeper and deeper into the fellowship. And it's a lovely community, and all over the world. And it is very nice, for want of a better way to put it. They're nice people. Mm-hmm. They're very much very. They reflect their origin in the British aristocracy. That they're very big believers in behaving in a good sort of way, although they come from everywhere in the world and all kinds of backgrounds. But things like diplomacy and just behaving well are kind of natural there for the most part. And Lady Olivia decided that she wanted me in the Noble Order of Terra. And so she created me a knight commander within that order with no warning whatsoever in the middle of a ceremony. And then later I found I was a member of I was a knight grand commander in the Grand Commanders Union in the Triad Union, which I was very flattered by. And very proud to be in that position. And if you were to ask me how I got there, I guess it was by doing good things at the right time. Mm-hmm. Because it was certainly not something I campaigned for or asked for. It was something that I was appointed to.
So there you go. That kind of makes a lot of sense. So the goddess tells us what we're doing. We don't ask the goddess if we can do something. It's kind of like
Yeah.
it just comes to you. Yeah. So that I really like the idea of that. Fellowship of Isis, like energy or just the whole feel of it just sounds really good. Like I'm nobody special, just kid from New Hampshire, but when I think about the Fellowship of Isis, it just makes me feel great. And it's great that you was able to share some of the things that you experienced with that. Olivia Robertson, it was probably a hell of a lot more colorful in person than on video. But
Oh yeah, she was.
But even on video, very inspiring, very warm. It's a personality that I would definitely would want to be around. So yeah, homage to Olivia Robinson, and I really am going to look into seeing if I can get a hold of some more video of Olivia Robinson. The problem that I've had, Dawn, is getting like adequate permission or thumbs up to play particular videos, because I don't know who they're particularly belong to, because of there was an FOI, like wasn't there like a split? I mean, I don't want to, some kind of split.
There was a controversy, we can say.
Right. So because of the controversy, I still like to get the adequate permissions and stuff. But yeah.
In the controversy,
Right.
I was definitely on the side of the Triad Union, simply by being a member of the Triad Union.
Yeah. So tell me, Dawn, what are you working on? What are you working at the moment? What's on your mind these days?
Well, I'm working on the new book.
Another book.
Yeah, another book. I'm thinking in terms of maybe doing the autobiography people have often asked me to do. Although, there's something final about doing an autobiography that gives one pause. Although I know people have done 2 or 3 of them in a lifetime. But I'm looking at that. I'm helping with a number of projects. At Corellian Publishing, we now have a number of authors working on a variety of books. And I'm involved with all of that. Yeah, there's lots going on. And this coming weekend, I will be in Buffalo, New York for the Corellian Regional Illustration there. A month after, I will be at another Corellian Regional Illustration here in Vermilion County in Illinois. My plate is not in any way empty. I will be going to the Nashville Pagan Pride Day in October. And so a lot of the things I've done, I'm still doing. So I think I would have to say that what I'm doing now is keeping on keeping on.
And are you now we talked about the obvious contribution to the pagan community as far as like video interviews. I've been a seeker of video interviews because of my personal passion for pagan media and online stuff and stuff like that. And what I've noticed, Dawn, is, and this is my own discernment, as far as like historical videos are concerned, I haven't found quite the payload in any other place but from what you have brought to the table here. So I think that's a monumental achievement as far as interviews go. Are your interview days over?
No.
Are you still? So that's not over yet.
No, it's not over.
Do you have a particular bucket list of interviews that you'd like to have that you haven't? And can you let me know about them?
I don't know that I have a bucket list. I think it's more the joy of finding interesting people where they are. And a lot of the interviews that I did, I had no idea they were going to happen before I went to the event and found that person was there. And I think that's how I like to approach it. Yes, there are people I want to interview. There are people I want to interview again. Um, but I think that, as in so many other things, if I have a bucket list, it's for those unexpected interviews that bring me things I didn't know or perspectives I was not aware of from people I wasn't necessarily ever thinking I would interview. So rather than seeking out particular people, I am hopeful that the universe will send me those interesting interviews to continue with.
Yeah, there we go. So has it become like part of your journey in life? Is it? I mean, where did you become first fascinated? You said VHS was your first kind of like, so you picked up this VHS like in the, because I mean I'm old enough to know what a VHS is, you know. So
not everybody is now.
Yeah, so that's really cool, man. And you said that you have video archives that aren't even public yet, and
that's true.
So it's like locked
they'll
up.
Take special equipment to be able to upload now.
Mm-hmm. And that equipment is getting cheaper.
Yes.
So it's possible. That's absolutely brilliant. Yeah. So Don Lewis, CarelianPublishing.com. You can find his books, and you can find all of his iconic interviews on Carelian TV on YouTube.
Mm-hmm. And you can go to CarelianTV.com and be right there.
And also, it's hard not to notice in your circuit, you have a Gaia thrift store. Are you involved in that in any way? You are involved.
Oh, yes, absolutely.
In that. Okay, so right off the rip, I came up with something. In the thrift shop, if I would walk in here, is there a Don Lewis section where we can get a fedora and the 3-piece suit and everything?
I think there will be.
And am I going to be able to get fitted?
Not yet, but perhaps in the future, yes.
Okay. I think that's a great idea, just to have a pagan thrift store. That's kind of really cool. I like the idea. And I wish that particular endeavor great fortune, Don. I really do.
Thank you.
I really do.
I appreciate that.
Because I have a feeling that, if somebody was really down and out and needed a pair of socks, I have a feeling that particular place, you guys would be like, okay, here's some socks, man. Good journey. Yeah, and that's, and I think, and that's what I really like about it is, being kind, so the grass, in the pagan community is running wild, but we are growing.
Yes.
So I think that would be a good thing to say. Don, is there any? Yeah.
This is the second or third time that I have seen that happening, and it's a phase we go through, and I hope that we make the most positive use of that growth on this occasion. That it empowers us to improve our community, to act in that kind way with people. I know that sometimes in the past it frightened people and had some of the opposite effect back in the days of the identity wars and so forth. But so far, I think our community has matured considerably in terms of how we're handling this period of growth.
That's a good note to end on. I'm the Lone Wolf. This is Reverend Don Lewis, and it's impossible to ignore the historic hard work that he's done in our pagan community. Keep it right here, Witchcraft TV, Lone Wolf Show.